Space. The final frontier.
Wow. Is this gonna happen every time we hit that button?
Very probably, yes.
The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a weird movie, and it's based on a weird book, which was in turn based on a weird radio drama that came out in 1978, all written by Douglas Adams. But even Adams has stated that it has appeared in many different forms and that it is very different every time. But why? Why rewrite the story when it's already been completed? Why go to all the effort to make it so different every time? That is what we're here to find out. Before we get into the specifics, if you haven't seen the movie or if it's been a while, let me give you a recap of the plot and characters. If you don't need this, feel free to skip forward to the next chapter or this time on screen in the video. Our main character, Arthur Dent, is going to have his home demolished to make room for a bypass. Arthur's friend Ford gives the construction crew some beers to hold them off from the demolition and takes Arthur to the local pub. Ford explains that he is an alien from a planet near Betelgeuse and also the world is going to end. Arthur, understandably, seems skeptical about whether this is all true. They also discuss Trisha McMillan, a girl Arthur met at a costume party. Trisha and Arthur seem to hit it off really well, but she asked him to go to Madagascar with her and he wanted to take things slower. Shortly after that at the party, she goes away with another guy who walks up and tells them that he's from a different planet. Arthur and Ford finish up their beers and Arthur heads back to his house, which has been demolished, when he notices some spaceships in the sky. Shortly after this, they hitch a ride on the spaceships owned by Vogons, the people who are destroying the Earth. The Vogons are also destroying Earth to make way for a bypass, which is ironic. Arthur and Ford are quickly captured after the Vogons figure out that they are on the ship. Then, after some terrible poetry, Arthur and Ford are ejected from the airlock. They are picked up by the Heart of Gold, a spaceship that blips into existence right where they are floating in space. This spaceship is occupied by Trillian and Zaphod, two people, as well as Marvin, the depressed robot. Trillian turns out to be Trisha, the woman that Arthur met at the costume party, and Zaphod is the guy who she bailed on Arthur for. It turns out that Ford also knows Zaphod because they're distantly related or something. Zaphod shows Arthur and Ford the recording that gives them some history on the supercomputer Deep Thought, which was designed to help answer the ultimate question. It isn't able to give them the question, but it knows the answer to the question is 42. And it tells them that it can give them another design that will help them answer what the ultimate question is that 42 is the answer to. But before it can tell them the name of that computer that will give them the question, the recording ends. Zaphod tells them that he stole the Heart of Gold because he has an infinite probability drive, which basically teleports them to a random spot in the galaxy every time they use it. This should help them find Magrathea, the planet that Deep Thought is on, since nobody knows where it is. They hit the button and end up at not Magrathea, but instead orbiting the planet Viltvodel 4, where Zaphod's election opponent Humakavula lives. Zaphod decides to go down to settle a score from the election, and it turns out that Humakavula has the coordinates for Magrathea, but he gets to keep one of Zaphod's heads hostage until they bring back what he wants, the point of view gun. Oh yeah. Also, Zaphod has a secret second head in his neck, that's what I'm talking about. As they are leaving, the Vogons catch up with them and capture Trillian, who they then have to go save. So Arthur, Marvin, Zaphod, and Ford all head to the Vogon homeworld and save Trillian by filing some paperwork. They trigger the infinite probability drive following this, arriving at Magrathea, where they have to avoid some missiles. Then they land, and everyone except Arthur and Marvin go to talk to Deep Thought, where they learn that the computer that was designed to answer what the ultimate question is was Earth. Trillian, Zaphod, and Ford also find the point of view gun, which makes other people understand your point of view, and Trillian shoots Zaphod with it, where we learn that she is in love with Arthur. Arthur and Marvin encounter Slabartafast, who takes them on a tour of the new Earth, Earth Mark II, which is being created to determine the ultimate question again since the first one was destroyed. He takes Arthur to his new house on Earth Mark II, where everyone else is eating food that has been provided by mice, who it turns out are the smartest beings on Earth and who also created Deep Thought and controlled Earth. The food and drink have some kind of drug in them, and they attempt to take Arthur's brain since they think it has the ultimate question in it since he came from Earth. But he ends up killing the mice and they escape, only to run into the Vogons, who they defeat by having Marvin shoot the point of view gun at them, making them all too depressed to continue. Zaphod goes back to his presidency, and the other three take off to go to the restaurant at the end of the universe. End of movie. Now they are all caught up, we can start talking about how different each version of the story is. We'll be focused on the differences between the movie and the book since they illustrate the biggest changes. And there's a good reason that these ones differ the most. Douglas Adams worked on the movie script for a very long time. He was able to finish the final draft of the screenplay, but unfortunately passed away in 2001, 3 years before the filming of the movie even began. We'll never know exactly how much they changed from his final draft to the actual screenplay and script for the movie, but with the way that Cary Kirkpatrick, the guy who edited it, talks about it, it's safe to say that he didn't want anything in the script that Adams wouldn't have wanted. There's actually a lot more to it than that. There's actually a whole article where Cary Kirkpatrick talks about how he edited the script and his mindset going in, and I'll have that linked in the description. As much as I appreciate Kirkpatrick's dedication to the original source material, I do have to say this is kind of disappointing. It leaves us sort of back at square one with why these stories are so different. So if it wasn't the usual adaptation nonsense where they change everything when they change it into a movie, then let's go through the movie, look at some of the differences between it and the book, and see if we can figure out maybe why some of these changes have been made. The biggest and I think the most criticized change in the movie is the inclusion of a love story between Arthur and Trillian, and I can see why. Not only have I personally criticized movies for doing this in the past, I think that this one is especially egregious on the surface. Arthur is weirdly attached to Trillian considering that they met each other one time at a party. Consider this, when his house is about to be demolished, he is still concerned about how he messed up with her at a party. Seems like more than he is about his house getting destroyed, and he must have met her at this party at least weeks, if not months ago. Not only that, he still has the picture of both of them on his phone, and he is like looking at it longingly while talking to Ford about her. I get Arthur's desire for closure and confusion about what happened since it seemed like they were really hitting it off, but honestly, there's just more important things going on in his life right now. Not only that, but when he sees her again, he makes a bunch of kind of snide comments about how she ditched him that night, and it doesn't really end there. Throughout the movie, he keeps bringing it up, and she kind of keeps telling him that he's being a baby about it, and sort of hinting at him that like she clearly doesn't want to talk about it and she's kind of over it. I'm all for talking about your feelings and being open and honest, but this really does feel like he is trying to convince her that she did something wrong more than it is he's trying to communicate. This just makes it all the more confusing when at the end of the movie we find out that she is in love with him, kind of seemingly out of nowhere. Maybe I just missed the foreshadowing for this, but it really seemed like to me there was no inkling that she was starting to grow feelings for him. He definitely had a big part in helping save her from the Vogons, but it also doesn't seem like she sees him as like her knight in shining armor or anything because of this. Zaphod does go downhill quite a bit over the course of the movie, so it's pretty easy to see why she gets disillusioned with him. But just because she's disillusioned with Zaphod doesn't mean she really needs to like Arthur. She could just not like anyone, and this seems like the most reasonable choice in my mind. Now, this isn't completely fabricated for the movie. They do make mention in the book that this thing at the party happened and that Zaphod had kind of stolen her attention, but they spend about a paragraph explaining this, and it's never talked about again. Most of the big changes are like this. They are things that were already featured in the book that have been heavily expanded upon or changed. But that really brings us back to the initial question. If it's not even a new idea and it's already in the book, why change it so much? Speaking of things that were in the book that were changed a lot, the Vogons are also something that was in the book, but that has been changed drastically for the movie. They still destroy the Earth to make way for a bypass, and also they still own the ship that Arthur and Ford end up on. How Arthur and Ford end up there is slightly different. There are a race of aliens called the Dentrasi that are cooks for the Vogons, and they're the ones who let Ford and Arthur onto the ship. But the big change that's worth discussing is how much of recurring characters the Vogons are. To understand this, I need to tell you guys that something that is really consistent about the book is that if something comes up, it is almost never referenced a second time. This includes the Vogons. Once Arthur and Ford are off their ship in the book, we never see them again. But as I've already discussed, in the movie, they are kind of one of the central antagonists. But again, we return to more questions. Why, if the Vogons are such a minor part of the novel, are they a reoccurring antagonist in the movie? But these aren't the only additions to the movie. Hama Kavula isn't even mentioned in the movie. They mention the planet that he's from, but he isn't a character at all or even mentioned in passing. We definitely don't go to his home planet, and he definitely doesn't take Zaphod's lower head. Especially because, and this is again a minor thing, in the book he has two heads like the normal way, like side by side instead of one under the other, and that's just because he's an alien. It doesn't have anything to do with him becoming president. But that leads us to the last big change in the movie, and also something that, at least for me, got me on this track of thinking why the movie might be so different from the books. You see, Homunculus sends them to get something for him, the point of view gun. It's a creative and interesting device for the movie, as it allows Trillian to externalize a lot of her internal dialogue, which is pretty cool, and it's also obviously how we find out that Trillian loves Arthur, but I also think it's more than that. You see, the original novel isn't just different in plot and characters, its theme is different, its message is different, it's written from a different point of view. The novel is extremely anti-establishment, and it's also at its core pretty nihilistic. Adams doesn't seem to believe that we can trust the government, and he also doesn't really seem to believe that existence has any inherent meaning. So of course he created a story where the president is a criminal, and everything in the plot just happens due to random chance. Even the ultimate question of purpose, the question of life, the universe, and everything, has an asinine and meaningless answer: 42. The movie, though, while maintaining this meaningless and asinine answer to the ultimate question, is still anti-government, but it's also not nihilistic like the book is. In fact, you could almost say that the main plot of the story is a man taking advantage of happenstance to create meaning in his life. Yes, he messed up with Trillian and honestly continued to mess up for quite a while after that, but as the story progresses, we can see him maturing and growing up a little bit and becoming someone that he is more proud to be. Instead of letting the universe drag him down, he did his best to stand up to it and get through the difficult moments without shying away from them. We even see this in the decision for the Vogons to be a recurring antagonist. Arthur needed something consistent to work against so that we could see his growth over the course of the movie. By doing all this, he found love and happiness in this inherent meaninglessness that we all feel from time to time in our lives. As cheesy as the final speech of this movie is, I do like to think that it represents not only Arthur's journey and his thoughts towards the end, but also, hopefully, the author's.
Fine. Fine, take it. My head is filled with questions, and I can assure you no answer to any one of them has ever brought me one iota of happiness. Except for one. The one. The only question I've ever wanted an answer to. Is she the one? The answer bloody well isn't 42, it's yes. Undoubtedly. Unequivocally, unabashedly, yes. And for 1 week, in my sad little blip of an existence, it made me happy.
It's a good answer.
If Adams met his own Trillian, it would have been his wife, Jane Belson, who he married in 1991. While he didn't speak publicly about his private life often, from the little tidbits we get, we can tell that they had a very loving relationship and that she seemed to be one of the people in his life who helped hold him together. Unfortunately, I don't think we got really a conclusive answer about why everything was changed so much in this video. Since Adams has passed away, we probably will never know exactly what was in his final screenplay and exactly why he changed the things that he did. But I do think that the importance of love in the story and also the inclusion of a gun that literally changes your point of view gives us a little bit of a hint about where his head was at. I like to think that in his earlier life, Adams was nihilistic and maybe even a little bit depressed and having a hard time, but then when he got a little bit older, he met someone who helped him find his own purpose and changed his opinions about the meaninglessness of existence. And while he never did go on to trust the government, which I think is understandable, I do like to think that Adams went on to find meaning in both love and family. Sorry for the sappy ending, but I wanted to be especially genuine with this one. The story that I went on throughout kind of the reading this book and watching this movie was pretty illuminating and interesting, and even if I'm wrong, I think that it was a fun exercise in trying to understand how someone's artistic passions change over time, and it's pretty rare that we get the same story from the same person after such a long period of time, so I think it gave us like a unique opportunity to look and see how maybe his art had changed and why over time. Anyways, I put out videos like this pretty regularly about book to movie adaptations. That's mostly what I focus on, that and indie book reviews. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, I would love it if you would subscribe. It would show the YouTube algorithm that my content is worth watching and that you're interested in more of it. And yeah, thank you guys so much for your time. I appreciate you guys watching. I hope that you had fun watching this. I had a great time making it. And I'll see you guys in the next one. The Penfield Mood Organ, named after the real-life neurosurgeon and researcher Wilder Penfield, is a device that allows neural stimulation to cause different emotions. Could dial